Max had always been more than just a dog. He was a legend among the officers at the Brooksville Police Department. For nearly a decade, the sturdy German Shepherd had served alongside Officer Tom Harris, his partner and best friend. Together, they had taken down drug operations, searched through disaster zones, and found missing people when hope seemed lost. But those days were now behind them. Max's retirement should have been quiet and relaxing. Officer Tom had imagined long walks, peaceful naps, and lazy afternoons in their sunny backyard. Instead, Max became obsessed. Just a few weeks after moving into their new house, in a quiet rural town, Max started digging. But not just anywhere. He kept returning to one specific corner of the backyard, near the old oak tree, at the edge of the fence. Morning, afternoon, even late at night, Max would head straight there, scratching and pawing at the dirt, with an intensity Tom hadn't seen in years. At first, Tom chuckled at it. Old habits die hard, he muttered to himself, watching Max toss up dirt, like he was back on a crime scene. Tom figured maybe a squirrel had buried something, or there was a scent that stirred up memories from Max's working days. But days turned into weeks, and Max didn't lose interest. If anything, he became more determined. He wouldn't eat until he had spent time digging. He ignored toys, ignored guests, and even resisted cuddles. It was like he was trying to tell them something. Neighbors began noticing. Some were amused, others curious. Mrs. Lindell from next door leaned over the fence one day and asked, "You bury something out there, Tom?" He laughed it off, but deep down, he was starting to feel uneasy. He tried digging a bit himself, a shallow hole, just to be sure, but he found nothing. Still, Max kept going back. Every morning, Tom would find fresh dirt flung across the lawn. Emily, Tom's 22-year-old daughter, came to visit for the weekend. As she stepped out onto the porch with a cup of coffee, she watched Max, ears pinned back, digging furiously. "Is he still doing that?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "It's kind of creepy now, Dad." Tom nodded. "Yeah, I thought it would stop. I even checked the spot. Nothing there. But he won't quit." Emily crouched near the spot, watching Max work. "He looks like he's on duty again. Like he knows something." She reached out to pet him, but Max barely noticed. He kept sniffing the ground like the scent was getting stronger. That night, Tom was woken by the sound of claws against the back door. Max wanted out. He usually slept through the night. Tom opened the door and followed him. Under a full moon, Max ran straight to the same corner and began digging again, faster, more frantically this time. Tom stood in silence, watching his old partner work like the old days. He was no longer laughing. He crouched beside him and ran his hand through the dirt. Something was different. The soil smelled strange, faint, but not natural. A memory surfaced in Tom's mind, the way Max used to act during drug searches, or when tracking human scent. This wasn't just random behavior. The next morning, Tom didn't go to the park like usual. Instead, he pulled out Max's old canine harness and looked at it for a long moment. The patches were faded, the Velcro frayed, but it reminded him of how many lives Max had changed. Maybe this wasn't just retirement boredom. Maybe this was something real. Emily returned with a metal detector a friend had lent her. As they swept it over the dig spot, a faint beep broke the silence. Tom looked at Emily. She looked back at him. "That's not nothing," she said quietly. Max, standing between them, let out a low, short bark. Tom's stomach tightened. He glanced once more at the dirt, then at Max. "All right, partner," he whispered. "Let's find out what you're trying to show us." Tom Harris hadn't felt this tense in years. The last time he'd had a gut feeling this strong was during a hostage rescue downtown, and that had nearly cost him his career. Now here he was again, staring at a piece of backyard dirt, heart racing, with his retired canine partner digging like the fate of the world depended on it. Max was relentless. His nails scraped the earth with force and urgency, throwing up clouds of dirt as if he knew every second mattered. Beside him, the metal detector Emily had borrowed gave off another weak beep. Not loud, not a solid signal, but definitely something. Tom grabbed a shovel and began to dig more seriously this time. He widened the hole by a few feet, going deeper than he had before. The soil was packed tight, untouched for what looked like years. Then, suddenly, he hit something not hard, not metal, but something strange. He knelt down and brushed away more dirt with his hands. His fingers touched what felt like crumbling wood. The texture was soft in places, almost spongy. A faint, odd smell drifted upward, not overpowering, but unnatural. Tom sat back on his heels and looked at Max. The dog stood still, eyes locked on the hole, tail stiff. For the first time in weeks, he wasn't digging. He was waiting. Emily knelt beside Tom. "What is that?" she whispered. Tom didn't answer right away. He pulled out a flashlight and shined it into the ground. "It looks like old wood. Maybe a box or a crate," he said slowly. "Could be rotted." Emily leaned closer. "Or buried on purpose." Tom looked at her, his jaw tightening. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves." Still, his mind was racing. Who buries a wooden box that deep in a backyard? And why would Max, a dog trained to detect everything from illegal substances to human scent, be so obsessed with it? Tom stood up, dusted off his hands, and took a slow breath. "I'm calling the sheriff's office." "Are you serious?" Emily asked, surprised. "I know that look in his eyes," Tom said, gesturing to Max. "He thinks he found something important. And after all those years working together, I trust him." Later that afternoon, Deputy Jenna Walsh arrived with a forensic technician. Tom had worked with Jenna during his last year on the force. She'd been a rookie back then. Now she was leading small investigations around town. She inspected the dig site quietly, glancing at the partially exposed wood. "It doesn't look like a typical time capsule or storage box," she said. "We'll need to be careful excavating it." The forensic tech, a quiet young man named Dylan, began using hand tools to clear the area. As more of the wood surface appeared, it became clear it wasn't a crate. It was more like a hatch, a square wooden door, set deep into the ground. "A storm shelter," Jenna guessed aloud. Tom shook his head. "Doesn't line up with the rest of the property. There's already a full basement." The technician paused. "This hatch has hinges." He pointed to rusted metal on one side, and a latch. Emily's eyes widened. Someone wanted it sealed. Max barked suddenly. Loud, urgent. He jumped toward the edge of the dig site, and began pawing again. Not at the hatch, but just beside it. Dylan moved quickly to uncover the spot Max indicated. Within minutes, a small rusty tin container emerged. He held it up carefully. It's sealed. Jenna opened it slowly. Inside, folded and yellowed with age, were several sheets of paper. She used tweezers to pull them out, and as she unfolded one, her brow furrowed. "This looks like a map," she said, "or some kind of hand-drawn plan. It has measurements and notes, and it's dated -1992. Tom leaned over her shoulder. The paper was smudged, but still legible. One phrase stood out clearly in the lower corner. "Don't let them find the room." Everyone was quiet. Emily whispered, "What room?" Jenna stood up straight. "We'll need to call this in. There might be more than we expected down there." Tom looked at Max, who was still alert, ears pricked. "You really weren't digging for nothing, were you?" he said softly, and in that moment, Tom realized this was no ordinary discovery. Whatever lay beneath that hatch had been hidden deliberately. And somehow, after all these years, Max had remembered a scent no one else could sense, and he wasn't about to let it be forgotten. Even after all his years in law enforcement, Tom Harris had never encountered something like this. That phrase written on the yellowed map, "Don't let them find the room," played over and over in his mind. It wasn't just the mystery of the hatch or the old map that haunted him. It was Max. The dog wouldn't leave the site, not even to eat. He laid next to the dirt pit, with his head resting on his front paws, eyes fixed on the hatch, as if guarding a secret only he understood. The sheriff's office had quickly sealed off the area. By early the next morning, crime scene tape surrounded Tom's backyard. A forensic team arrived from the county, and Jenna Walsh returned with new documents in hand. She had already started looking into property records and older blueprints. For the house, what she found added to the mystery. "Tom, this house was built in 1986, she explained as she handed him a scanned floor plan. "But these plans don't show anything underneath the yard. No shelter, no cellar extension. It's as if whatever's under there was added in secret, after the original construction." Tom took the papers, his eyes narrowing. "So someone built that room, without permits, without records, and then tried to hide it." Jenna nodded. "The question is, why?" Meanwhile, the forensic crew worked carefully to remove the rest of the soil surrounding the hatch. They uncovered a metal ring embedded in the wooden surface, a handle. When the technician gently tugged on it, the hatch groaned open on rusted hinges. A cold draft rose from the darkness below. They shined a flashlight into the hole. A wooden staircase led down, steep and narrow. The air smelled of mold and dust. Tom crouched near the entrance, gripping the flashlight tightly. Max stood behind him, silent now, but alert. "Are we going down there?" Emily asked, her voice low. Jenna motioned for the forensic team to prepare. "We'll go one at a time. It might not be structurally stable." Tom was the first to descend, followed by one of the technicians. The staircase creaked under their weight, but it held. The light from above barely reached the bottom. So Tom's flashlight swept across the room carefully. What they saw made them stop cold. It was a small underground chamber, maybe 12 feet by 12, lined with concrete walls and a dirt floor. Old furniture, covered in sheets, stood along one side. A broken lamp lay toppled near the corner. But what truly caught their attention was the far wall. Scratched into the concrete, deep, deliberate, and shaky were the words, "Help me." Tom took a slow step forward, the beam of his flashlight catching a rusted chain bolted into the floor nearby. It was only a few feet long. "Someone was kept down here," he said quietly. "And not for a short time." The forensic technician began photographing the scene, and Jenna radioed for backup. As more lights were set up and the scene became clearer, they found more unsettling details. Worn bedding, empty cans of food, even what looked like pieces of old children's toys. Emily, standing at the top of the stairs, watched silently as the investigators documented every inch. Her voice trembled when she finally spoke. "Do you think someone was living here?" "Not by choice," Tom replied grimly. Then he remembered something, a detail from long ago. Max's last case before retirement. A missing girl. A case that had haunted him because they never found a body, never found a trace after the first week. But Max had acted the same way then. Focused, agitated, pulling toward a storage yard near an abandoned house. The house had been a few blocks from here. Could Max be remembering the scent? Had that memory stayed with him all this time? Tom's chest tightened. He looked down at Max, who had finally stepped into the stairwell, his nose twitching as he sniffed the musty air coming from below. Tom whispered to himself, "What did you never stop smelling, boy?" Whatever was down there, it had been hidden for decades. Forgotten by the town. But not by Max. Now, with the room exposed, Tom knew they were only beginning to uncover the full story. And Max, the dog everyone thought was finished, had just reopened a case the town had long buried. Tom Harris hadn't thought about the Samantha Dean case in years. The name alone brought back a storm of emotions. Frustration, guilt, and worst of all, unanswered questions. She was only 12 when she vanished from her neighborhood one summer evening. Despite massive search efforts, no solid leads had ever emerged. Max had been assigned to that case. He had pulled toward a warehouse just blocks from the girl's home. But with no evidence and no official warrant, they'd been forced to stop. Now, as Tom stood in the middle of a hidden underground room, below his own backyard, memories of that week came flooding back. Max had spent hours sniffing near the property line of that same abandoned warehouse, refusing to leave. Tom had believed him back then, but no one else did. The trail went cold, and the case was shelved. Tom stepped carefully across the concrete floor, the faint markings on the wall, the rusted chain in the center, and the crude mattress stuffed in one corner told a story that no one wanted to hear. He knelt beside the bedding and picked up what looked like a child's bracelet. It was faded, pink, with tiny plastic beads. Some letters were still readable. SAM. He didn't need the rest to know what it once spelled. Tom stood slowly, his eyes watering. He looked up the stairwell, where Emily waited with Jenna. "I think Max found what we missed all those years ago," he said, voice tight with emotion. "I think this was Samantha's prison." Emily's face went pale. "Here, all this time," Jenna signaled to her team to begin processing the evidence. "We'll confirm everything," she said, though her tone carried the weight of disbelief. "We'll run DNA, cross-reference the bracelet with family photos, and reopen the case." Max paced the small space, nose to the ground. He paused at the far wall, then gave a short, sharp bark. Tom moved toward the sound and spotted a narrow gap near the floor, a seam between concrete and earth. He crouched to inspect it and noticed something wedged inside. With gloved hands, he carefully pulled out what appeared to be an old journal or notebook, its leather cover cracked with age. Flipping it open, he saw handwritten pages, most difficult to read. But one line near the beginning stopped him cold. "My name is Samantha Dean. I don't know how long I've been here." Tom closed his eyes. After all these years, the voice had finally reached the surface. Back above ground, forensic teams began collecting items for analysis. A pathologist was called to examine the space for remains or biological evidence. The news spread quickly. By nightfall, a dozen reporters had gathered outside Tom's property. His backyard had become a crime scene, and Max, once seen as just an old retired dog, was suddenly the center of a mystery that rocked the quiet town. Neighbors who had lived there for decades came forward with vague memories, rumors of strange construction sounds in the early 90s, odd deliveries in the middle of the night. No one had ever connected those whispers to a missing girl. Tom retreated to the living room with Emily and Max. The dog rested at his feet, clearly exhausted, but alert, eyes flicking toward the backyard door every few minutes. He knew, Emily whispered. He never forgot her scent, did he? Tom nodded slowly. Max always had a memory better than anyone gave him credit for, and he trusted his instincts. I should have pushed harder back then, but you didn't know, Emily said gently. You couldn't have known this would lead here. Tom looked down at Max, who was finally starting to relax, his breathing steady. You found her, he said softly. After all these years, you never gave up. That night, Tom sat alone for hours, reading every page of the journal. Samantha had documented everything her early days underground. The small routines she used to keep sane. The sound of footsteps above that gave her hope, then silence that took it away. Her writing stopped abruptly near the back of the notebook. The last page was blank except for a single sentence. Maybe someone will come. I still believe they will. And now, someone had. Not a person, but a dog who refused to stop digging. By sunrise, the investigation beneath Tom Harris's backyard had taken a serious turn. What started as an unusual obsession from a retired police dog had led to the discovery of a hidden underground chamber, one that likely held the key to a decades-old mystery. But investigators weren't finished. As forensic teams continued combing through the space, one technician noticed something odd about the back wall. While the other three sides were solid concrete, the far wall had a different tone when tapped, a hollow echo, not a dense one. Jenna, the tech called out, there's something behind this. Tom stood nearby with Max at his feet. The old dog lifted his head again and gave a low growl, his ears pricking up. The wall wasn't thick. Within an hour, investigators removed part of the crumbling concrete and exposed what appeared to be a narrow tunnel. The air that flowed from it was cold and stale, untouched for years. Jenna Walsh, now leading the field investigation full-time, exchanged a tense look with Tom. You want to take the first look? She asked. Tom nodded. Let's see where this leads. Wearing protective gear, Tom entered the tunnel, flashlight in hand. Max tried to follow, but Tom gently gestured for him to stay. The passage was barely wide enough for one person to pass through, its walls jagged and rough. After several tense minutes, Tom stepped into another room, smaller than the first, but completely different. It had no furniture, just shelves. Dozens of dusty boxes lined them, labeled only with faded numbers and initials. He lifted one box down and opened it slowly. Inside were notebooks, Polaroid photos, receipts, and newspaper clippings. Most of them appeared unrelated missing persons cases, old arrest reports, and some handwritten notes with names that didn't match any known files. Jenna and two other officers joined him inside the second room. One officer flipped through a notebook and stopped. Look at this, he said. He held up a sketch of the house above them. A circle was drawn exactly where the hidden hatch had been. More concerning were the notes beside it, phrases like store, only when certain, remove trace by spring, and dogs know too much. Tom took the paper and stared at it. This was planned. It wasn't random. Jenna agreed. It looks like this entire setup wasn't just for hiding someone. It may have been part of something larger. Maybe more victims, more secrets. They continued searching the boxes, documenting each one carefully. Then, near the bottom shelf, they found a locked metal case. Jenna picked the lock and slowly lifted the lid. Inside were several faded driver's licenses. Photos of individuals who had all gone missing over the past 25 years, including Samantha Dean. Tom's heart pounded. There was also a cassette tape labeled simply, Confession, 1998. They bagged the evidence and returned topside. The weight of what they had uncovered was enormous. Not only had Max led them to a hidden chamber, but that chamber might be connected to several cold cases, thought to be unrelated. By late afternoon, news vans lined the quiet street. Reporters shouted questions from the sidewalks. The peaceful neighborhood had become a crime scene from a story no one thought possible. Max sat quietly on the porch beside Tom, watching it all unfold. People waved to him, called him a hero, but he didn't respond. His eyes remained fixed on the backyard, like he knew the work wasn't done yet. Emily returned home with groceries and knelt to hug Max. "You did something incredible. Boy," she whispered. "You brought her voice back. And maybe even more." Tom leaned against the railing, arms crossed. He'd spent a lifetime following procedure, waiting for evidence, filing reports. But Max hadn't waited. Max had remembered. And now, that memory was leading investigators toward something bigger than anyone had imagined. As the sun began to set, Jenna approached Tom with a clipboard in hand. "We're having the tunnel mapped and sealed temporarily until a forensic path team arrives. We've also opened every cold case from 1990 to 2000 in the county." Tom exhaled slowly. "And to think it all started with a hole in the dirt." "No," Jenna said. "It started with a dog who wouldn't give up, and the deeper they dug both into the ground and into the past, the more it seemed that Max had uncovered far more than anyone dared believe." By the next morning, the story had reached national news. What started as a retired police dog's odd behavior in a quiet neighborhood had turned into a full-blown investigation into one of the state's oldest unsolved cases and, possibly several more. Reporters from all over arrived in Brooksville, crowding the sidewalks and leaning over fences to get a glimpse of the now infamous backyard. Headlines read things like, "Hero Dog Uncovers Secret Bunker Linked to Missing Girl." "Retired Canine Sniffs Out Decades-Old Mystery." "Buried Truth Unearthed by Loyal Dog's Instincts." Inside the investigation tent, Sheriff Lane, now leading the broader investigation, stood over a table full of photographs, notebooks, and collected items from the hidden chambers. The cassette tape marked Confession. 1998 had been digitized overnight, and the contents were chilling. A man's voice spoke clearly, slowly. He described keeping someone hidden for their own good, referencing the girl who wouldn't stop screaming. Though he never mentioned Samantha Dean by name, details matched her case precisely. The voice mentioned dates, the small pink bracelet, and even the sound of police dogs sniffing around the building years ago. "That's enough," Sheriff Lane said, cutting off the playback. "We have what we need." Jenna turned toward him. "So we can confirm it, that she was here." He nodded grimly. "Yes. And now we might have leads on 5 other disappearances from surrounding towns." Back at Tom Harris's home, Max lay beside the back door, head resting on his paws. He looked tired. Not sick but aged, worn from the effort of everything he'd uncovered. Emily sat with him on the floor, running her fingers through his fur. "He hasn't moved much today," she said to Tom. "I think it's catching up with him." Tom knelt beside them and scratched behind Max's ears. "He's done more than enough." The forensic teams had cleared out for the moment. Everything from the hidden chamber was now in evidence custody. The ground had been recovered with temporary boards, and caution tape still fluttered around the yard. Tom stood up and walked out onto the porch, where a reporter from a major network was waiting for a comment. He had been declining interviews all day, but this time he paused. "You've been quiet," the reporter said. "Do you have anything to say about your dog about Max?" Tom glanced back at the screen door, where Max still lay peacefully. "Think people don't realize what a dog like him carries," Tom said quietly. "They don't forget the things we move on from. They don't let go. Max didn't just find something in that ground. He remembered something no one else could, and he didn't stop trying to tell us." The reporter, moved by his words, nodded and stepped away. She didn't need more than that. Inside the house, Jenna returned with a folder in her hand. "DNA came back from the bedding," she said. "It matches Samantha Dean's living relatives." Tom closed his eyes for a moment, then looked down at Max again. "She was here," Jenna added gently. "And thanks to him, we know, the family knows. She can finally be laid to rest." Later that evening, the Dean family arrived quietly at the property. They didn't want attention, only a moment of privacy. Tom led them to the yard and gave them space. Emily offered them tea, and Max, surprisingly, stood and walked over to Samantha's mother, gently pressing his head into her side. She knelt beside him, tears in her eyes, and whispered something into his ear. No one asked what it was. They didn't need to. The family placed a small bouquet near the dig site and left a note tucked beneath the flowers. It read simply, "Thank you, Max. You remembered her when no one else could." By nightfall, Tom sat with Max beneath the stars. The old dog leaned gently against him, eyes half closed. "You did good, boy," Tom whispered. "You did what none of us could." Max gave one soft thump of his tail, then let out a quiet sigh. And for the first time in months, he didn't dig. He simply rested because his mission was complete. It didn't take long for the story of Max's discovery to spread beyond the town. even beyond the country. He had become something more than just a retired police dog. He was a symbol of loyalty, memory, and a justice long delayed. People from across the state began sending letters, treats, paintings, even handmade collars with Max's name etched in gold. Social media was flooded with posts bearing hashtags like #Max, the hero, and #NeverForgotten. Back in Brooksville, a quiet sense of pride and sadness filled the air. The town had never seen so much media attention. Yet beneath the buzz was a deep reflection, how something so dark could remain buried for decades, and how a single dog had brought it all to the surface. The town council held a special meeting. Just 3 days after the discovery, they voted unanimously to honor Max's service with a permanent memorial in the town square. Plans for a bronze statue began almost immediately, and local children submitted drawings for what it should look like. Some drew Max standing proudly with his paw over the ground. Others drew him next to Samantha, guiding her into the light. Tom wasn't used to the attention. He had spent most of his life behind the scenes, doing the quiet work that didn't make headlines. But now, he found himself invited to interviews, radio shows, and town hall events. Each time, he spoke only of Max. This wasn't about instinct alone, he said in one local interview. It was about loyalty. Max remembered something I'd forgotten. He knew something wasn't right, and he never gave up trying to show us. Max, for his part, didn't seem to care about the attention. He remained calm and gentle, happy just to be near Tom or Emily. Still, there were moments when he would stand by the back door, looking out at the now covered hole, his ears alert, as if listening for something only he could hear. The Dean family returned for a small, private ceremony a week later. The site had been cleared, cleaned, and temporarily marked with a wooden cross and flowers. Tom stood beside them, Max at his heel. There were no cameras, no press, just the people who mattered. Samantha's mother placed a folded letter in a small metal box and buried it gently next to the flowers. Her father leaned down and patted Max's head, whispering a quiet thank you. Then the family stood in silence, holding hands, the wind moving softly through the trees. Afterward, Emily posted the photo of the memorial online, a simple image of Max sitting quietly beside the cross, the evening sun casting a warm light over his fur. The post went viral within hours, with thousands commenting on the power of one animal's persistence and love. But the story didn't end there. Sheriff Lane announced that, due to the evidence found in the hidden passage, including files, photos, and the confession tape, a statewide investigation was being launched into missing persons cases from the early 1990s to the 2000s. Leads began pouring in. Other towns, other families, other quiet streets with their own secrets. Tom was asked to consult on a few of the reopened cases, but he made it clear that he wouldn't leave Max's side. "If I help," he said, "he comes with me." Max, though slower and a little stiffer in his walk, still responded with a spark in his eyes whenever he heard the zip of Tom's old gear bag. One afternoon, as they returned from a town event, Tom noticed a new wooden sign nailed to the post near the park trail entrance. Max's Trail, in honor of the dog who remembered. Tom smiled. Max wagged his tail. The people of Brooksville hadn't just found justice. They'd found something even more rare. A reminder that truth can survive even the deepest burying. And sometimes, the ones who find it aren't the loudest, the strongest, or the ones in uniform. Sometimes, they're just the ones who never forget. The seasons began to change in Brooksville. Summer faded into autumn, and the trees that lined the streets shed their leaves like memories falling gently to the ground, though life in the quiet town began to settle. The story of Max's dog who never forgot continued to ripple far beyond its borders. Construction on Max's statue began in the town square, right in front of the library. Local sculptor Lydia Carver, who had grown up in Brooksville, volunteered to design it for free. She'd been only 10 when Samantha Dean disappeared. Now, decades later, she found herself shaping the face of the hero who helped uncover what no one else could. The statue was to be cast in bronze, showing Max mid-dig, head lowered in determination, one paw forward, eyes focused. Beneath it, the inscription would read, "Max, he remembered when others forgot." But while the town was preparing a permanent tribute, time was beginning to catch up with Max. He had stopped digging entirely. He didn't pace by the door anymore. Most days, he preferred to lie on the porch, soaking in the sun, quietly observing the world he had helped set right. His appetite had shrunk, and his steps had become slower. Tom knew what it meant. He had seen this in other dogs before, but it didn't make it easier. Max was tired, but he was peaceful. One chilly morning, Tom found Max curled up in his bed, beside the fireplace, eyes closed, breath shallow. Emily knelt beside him, tears already welling up. He waited until it was done, she whispered, stroking his fur. He waited until she was found. Tom sat beside him and placed a hand gently on Max's head. "You did good, partner," he said. "You gave her family peace. You gave this town answers. And you reminded all of us what loyalty looks like." Max's tail gave one final, faint wag. Then he let out a soft breath, and was gone. The entire town mourned. Flags at the police station flew at half-mast. Dozens gathered at the park for a candlelight vigil. Children left stuffed animals and hand-drawn cards at the fence surrounding the backyard, the place where Max had first started digging. The Dean family returned once more. Samantha's mother placed a white rose beside the wooden cross that still stood at the site. Her father kneeled, pressing a hand into the soil. "Because of you," he said quietly, "we can rest too." Tom buried Max beneath the old oak tree, the same tree he'd dug beside for months. The town helped build a small stone marker with Max's name and badge number from his years of service. Emily painted his paw print onto a nearby rock and sealed it with clear coat, so it would last through rain and snow. As the years passed, Max's story became part of Brooksville's history. His statue became a place of reflection, not just for locals, but for people who traveled from miles away. Some came with their own dogs, hoping to teach them about courage. Others came with their children, wanting them to understand what it means to never give up on something that matters. Tom eventually retired for good, but he never moved away. He stayed in the same house, kept the backyard untouched, and tended to the oak tree where Max was laid to rest. Every so often, he'd find a small toy, collar, or thank you note, left near the tree by someone who had heard Max's story. Emily published a book titled The Dog Who Remembered. It became a national bestseller, used in classrooms and book clubs not just for what Max had uncovered, but for what he represented. In the final chapter, she wrote, "Max didn't speak. He didn't write. But he told a story louder than any words ever could. He reminded us to trust our instincts, to honor the past, and to listen because sometimes the quietest voices are the ones trying the hardest to be heard." And somewhere, deep in the hearts of those who followed his journey, Max lived on. Not just as a police dog, but as a legend, as a friend, as the one who never forgot.